web streaming. He's given me the thumbs up, and I believe that means that Mike Clanton is about to join us. He's probably waiting in the wings, I would have thought, Mr. Mike Clanton. So we're going to introduce him in a moment. What we're talking about next is Mike is going to talk about the event connectivity and how important that is. I can see Mike on the screen right now. So guess where, anybody in the online audience, where would you say Mike is going to be speaking to us from? Is it really Paris, I wonder? But Mike, you're actually based in Strasbourg, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Exactly. Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone.
You're based where, sorry?
I'm based in Strasbourg. Exactly.
Strasbourg.
It's on the border of Germany.
On the border of Germany. So you can escape over to Germany if you so feel, for a weekend break or whatever. Brilliant.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's nice to see you. You're coming in really nicely. I'm just being told, tilt your camera a little bit if you could. We don't want your chopped head. That's perfect. Whoop.
Oh.
Yeah, that's excellent. Stop. A
Okay.
little bit more, and then you're absolute. That's good, yeah. So I'm getting. We want to get it right for the online audience. That's the whole point, and the audience that are seeing you here right now in Abu Dhabi. So tell me, what weather have you got outside your window?
Well, it was cloudy, but now the sun came out, and I think it'll stay out for another hour or two, I'm hoping.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so outside, I mean, you can't compete with us. Just to let you know, outside here we have a beautiful blue sky, plus it's about 29 degrees, more than 29 degrees. So we're enjoying that. But it's lovely to see you, and I know that we are now going to have a talk about connectivity, issue of Wi-Fi, if it's free, is it good enough for events, and you're going to let us know about some of the trends that are going on in that part of the very important space of technology that sometimes people forget about. I mean, we're very lucky right here, right now. We have a dedicated RTE event camp network operating just for us. So I'm able to keep up to date with all the tweets and all of the other things that are going on. And that's separate from the rest of the GIBTM show floor, which is absolutely superb. So I know you'd approve of that. I thought we'd start there. And I'm going to hand over to you now to present, and I will be back to ask you questions and take other feedback from the rest of the audience. So over to you and your show.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen so you won't be able to see me, but you'll be able to hear me. So as Paul mentioned, my name is Mike Clanton. I design temporary networks for event managers, mainly for event team managers. And so I'm here today to talk about real-world applications. There are trends that are happening within our industry, and what does it mean for us? And so, but before we jump in there, I want to just state that where I'm from. Briefly, we mentioned that I'm on the border of Germany and France. I'm about several kilometers away from Kiel, which is the nearest German city. Strasbourg is also the home to the Council of Europe and the European Parliament, and is the bike capital of France. And I love biking. So I just wanted to get that started real quick. And now let's just dive right in. Let's kick this thing off. Most of our events are connected to connectivity. We're addicted to it. We need it in order for us to make our meetings work. So the question I had was, is your event dependent on connectivity? And the vast majority of events increasingly are the big yes, they are. So I'm going to discuss some of the key trends, how that's affecting us at the industry, but I'm going to break that down because there are certain key conference stakeholders that this is affecting within the industry, which I'm going to highlight that and talk about how we can better manage that. One of the key things that I'm going to talk about is the trends, and just an overview of what the trends are. People are looking for seamless, continuous connectivity while they're in their conference space. They also want an endless amount of bandwidth, which that's not realistic because, as you know, most resources are limited. So as planners, as organizers, as people that are participants, we need to know how to better manage this because there is an illusion that it's endless amount of bandwidth. Another challenge is that devices are getting ever increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller, which means they have limited storage capacity. That means they're more dependent on having a stable, secure connection. What that does, and that affects the infrastructure. Most venues will invest in their network infrastructure. I mean, the wireless network, the wired network, but they realize you have to keep refreshing it, and that's causing a lot of pain and hurt on everyone's end. Then we need to talk about, which we'll talk about, the ratio versus the participant. So you'll have the actual delegate or the participant there, and they may have multiple devices. We need to discuss that. That's a massive trend, as well as the allocation of bandwidth. There's so much demand for it. We need to be able to throttle that bandwidth. And a lot of planners are coming to me directly. Again, I work directly with planners exclusively in the event team. I'm an extension of the event team, of the actual organization itself. And they say, Michael, help me mitigate my risk. They don't really use that term, but that's what they're asking. But before we dive into there, let's talk about free. Let's talk about complimentary services, because this is on everyone's minds right now. And the nature of complimentary services really surround as a goodwill gesture. It's a goodwill gesture from behalf of the person giving it, the organization giving it. Generally speaking, the goodwill gesture is a standard offering. It's normally self-service, it's very simple, non-complex, and normally for that person or that organization giving something complimentary, it's normally a low cost. It's a nice to have, and it's a nice gesture. This is very similar to what we have in hotels. In hotels, we'll have, as we're in the lobby area, we're rushing out to our meetings, we will have coffee stands, tea stands, just simple things there in the lobby area. Not all hotels provide this, not all venues, but some will. And they're normally self-service. You help yourself. A lot of times it get messy and messy and needs to be cleaned, so a lot of hotel staff will come. Now I'm giving an analogy here, everyone, so please bear with me for those that are really Wi-Fi network savvy. But I want to just bring in the allegory of how this works. And we also understand when it comes to coffee, there's also specialty coffees, and there are specialty teas, and we need someone to help manage that. We need someone to help service that to us so we can get it exactly right according to how they want it. We have the same expectations when it comes to eating out or private dining, fast food, chef's table. We understand the difference with full service and self-service. I want us then also to use that same thing to talk about free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi is exactly that. It is a free will gesture. It's a goodwill gesture. It's a standard offering. It's self-service. It's simple and low cost for the provider. And it's ideal for non-mission critical internet usage. For basic browsing, uploads, downloads, and with free Wi-Fi, it assumes, or shall I say, the service is set up where it assumes that everyone's the same. All the different users, you use it the same way. So it's just a basic standard. It doesn't give anything else. So when we're talking about free, we need to understand what that means. But then when we're talking about specific services and what are the trends in the industry, the trends are the following. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of delegates want to have a specific service, very similar to how we like our coffees and our teas. So with that said, a lot of events are mission critical, where they need to have a stable network, and where you have exhibitors and trainers and speakers and sponsors and social media, and then the event team, not to mention the remote speakers and participants, who all have the unique needs on how they need to use the connectivity and how they need to use the wired or wireless bandwidth. Managing the network is important during this because you need to be able to monitor it, and then at the same time reassure the network by shoring it up, adding more resources here, adding more bandwidth here, adding more hardware here, adding more support, providing real-time monitoring and reporting for the event team so they can manage this properly. In addition, there's video conferencing services, like streaming, and mobile apps. Now, mobile apps don't really take a lot of bandwidth, but can you imagine when everyone comes to your event and they download their app while they are at your venue and there's limited bandwidth? So one of the major focuses here that I wanted to just drive home as well is that one of the trends are high-density Wi-Fi. High-density Wi-Fi, we need to look at the ratio between devices and the actual participants and the dedicated bandwidth. And so, for example, you could be in the room that's designed to hold 50 people, and so maybe that room is able to support 50 devices. However, most people will have multiple devices. And what are those people doing? Are they exhibitors? Are they trainers? And so because of that, because there's an assumption that maybe the room holds 50 people, that it should be able to hold 50 devices, there we have a paradox because most, depending on what they're doing, they're going to have multiple devices. And this will create a havoc or create a demand for high density Wi-Fi that specializes for those particular needs in that room. Another trend that I'm seeing as well is bandwidth redundancy. Like if you look to the left, you'll see where it says connected, and that arrow represents connectivity, the bandwidth, the actual line going from the hotel out to the internet. And then to the up to the right, my right, hopefully it's the same way with you, you'll see that the line doesn't quite connect to the cloud because there's something wrong with that network. There's something wrong with that circuit. In most instances, I'm having a lot of planners and event organizing team, before they select a venue, they will ask the venue, the hotel, the conference center, where it be, do you have redundant backup? Do you have an appropriate backup line? And in most cases, the answer, depending on the part of the world, in some cases the answer is no. And so what the venue then will find a solution for the planner or for that team to see what it will take to bring in a second line. Because what we're talking about is risk mitigation. When you invest all these resources to bring everyone to one part of the planet or one physical location, you want to make sure that everyone's able to communicate, be it those that are in the room and those that are remote. So having redundant backup is a trend that I've been seeing for the last several years, and it's increasing as connectivity becomes more of a stickler and becomes more mission critical. Now let's talk more about other trends that I see, but what's fueling these trends? And there are two things that I have seen, again, as designing temporary wireless networks for meeting event planners and for meeting those unique needs for exhibitors. I'm noticing that people are more mobile. They want to get their personal and professional information, content. But I'm also noticing as well as that there's built-in obsolescence. And I put this here on purpose just so we can understand there is planned built-in obsolescence by the manufacturer, by our entire technology industry, because it just helps promote sales. So as organizers, as people in the industry, we need to understand that because we can't meet every need because it's built-in obsolescence. The system, you can never catch up. But we can manage this and plan this by understanding we need to focus more on mobility and accessibility for the content so people can access it properly. So who are we talking about? Who are these people in the industry? And I don't want to be all generic, but I see there are three distinct, and I call them conference stakeholders. Three distinct conference stakeholders within the event industry. One of being is the conference venue, be it the hotel, the conference center, or the conference space, or an outdoor venue that provides this service. And then there is the organizer themselves, the event team. And then we have the actual delegate themselves, the participant. But what's unique and what's interesting is that the conference venue will just react to what the organizer requests, and then the organizer will respond to what the participant needs or the delegate needs, and the delegate then will jump on the latest, generally speaking, the latest fad or latest available technology, and so everyone is chasing behind everyone, and it's just this crazy circle that's happening. And so everyone's kind of reacting and not really being proactive as much as we should. So one of the areas that I would like to focus on is how do we manage this connectivity? So let's look at this from the perspective of the conference venue. From the conference venue, we need to understand, as a conference venue provider, do you provide free Wi-Fi? And if you do, then understand the constraints and the strengths of that. If you're in a particular room, will this free Wi-Fi, will this service support the needs of these conference stakeholders? And you need to understand, are you supporting the device or supporting the person itself? So if you decide that you don't use free Wi-Fi or you don't want to offer that as a venue now, from a venue managing it, Then you need to look at, okay, how do I approach this? The best thing to do is your network needs to be flexible and secure. And by that means that the network infrastructure needs to be up to par, where your wireless network, and you have maximum amount of bandwidth, and if you don't have it, you have the ability to throttle it up, because this will help bring in additional individuals, additional events. Also look at the possibility of having a backup line, or if you can't provide that, have the opportunity then of perhaps knowing how to get a backup line and who the planner will need to speak with. And more importantly, and I know we're living in a wireless age, and I know we don't really think this way, but it's important to make sure we have lots of wired ports. Once again, I'll say this again, it's very important in this wireless era we live in that there is ample wired ports in the meeting space and meeting area. This wired ports and cabling allows us to create a network designed for that particular event, because a wireless service is a generic blanketing of bandwidth. But when you actually design a wireless network for a particular event, you want to be able to bring in the proper tools that are wired behind the scenes and position the access points, position the wireless access points, and how the people move about the venue. And obviously, we've been saying this, I've mentioned this before, but it's really important to understand the device versus the participant ratio, because that's critical. From the meeting planner perspective, it's first thing to understand from the event team perspective is internet mission critical? Is that link really needed? Do you really need connectivity? And if so, then why? Quantify that. Why is connectivity needed? And then when you understand this from a planner perspective and learning how to manage it, then you can kind of do like a SWOT analysis and understand what are the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. Because if this is mission critical, then it's important to understand the general use of the connectivity. So will the connectivity be used for video conferencing, for training, for presentation, for web streaming, for social media, for a host of things? And then it's good to understand just how the participants will use it. Will they use it for exhibitors, will speakers, or trainers? It's important to understand how they will use it. Now, you may not be able to know everything about how they're using it, but it's important as the organizing team to understand an overview. Like, for example, most people consume food, but we all consume food differently. Some people are vegetarians, some people eat meat, some people will only eat certain types of meat. And so as planners, as organizers, we understand that everyone consumes food, but we consume it differently. And all I'm asking is that to better manage your connectivity needs is that you're right, everyone does consume bandwidth, but everyone consumes bandwidth differently. An exhibitor will generally speaking consume bandwidth differently than someone who's a sponsor and a trainer, or maybe your event team will consume it differently. So we need to look at it from that perspective and not think that everyone consumes bandwidth the same way. This will help manage the connectivity, the cost, and the expectation. I trust I'm coming through loud and clear, Paul, so I will go to the next slide. I'm wrapping it up with the next several slides. But it's also important to look at how to best manage connectivity from the participant perspective. So this is mainly geared to just the exhibitors and the speakers and the trainers. I understand there may be other individuals who are in the general population, such as the regular delegate, but they have little, if not much control. But the exhibitor, the speaker, and the trainer, it's important for them to understand, where is my event being held? How much bandwidth, or how will this work for me? When can I set up? Why can't I come in early? Who am I speaking with if I have any challenges? What are my options? It's important for upfront to ask these questions to better manage the connectivity and the expectation. Because if you understand how your meeting room sets up, if you understand how things are going around in your conference space, it'll allow you to better manage that connectivity. Because connectivity is a finite resource that needs to be managed. And if it's not managed, there's an assumption then that it's endless, and everyone will gobble at it like at a salad bar. Everyone will just eat all they can, thinking that someone will replenish it, but it needs to be monitored, managed, and maintained. So I believe I covered some of the top spots here because I really want to get to your questions and address these. But again, we discussed free services, the trends around that. Free services are great. Just have an understand. Free services are only ideal for simple services, not something that's really complex. And understand is one size fit all. There's a huge demand in the conference space for seamless and continuous bandwidth connectivity. It's important that you understand how to manage that and understand that the bandwidth is not endless, and so it's important to have your team to see how much bandwidth is available and allocate the bandwidth according to the mission critical status of each of the different stakeholders. Understand that the devices themselves are getting smaller and smaller, therefore the storage capacity is shrinking as well. That means there's more connectivity on the cloud, which I'm saying is more connectivity on the internet. So as a planner, as a venue provider, and as a delegate, if you understand that, you can better expectation, improve your expectation, and realize that I need stable connectivity in order for me to go to this event, be it remote or be it within the traditional four walls. The next one deals with just the upgrades. Again, I'm just doing a highlight, but the upgrading of the equipment from the venue side is an enormous cost. It's an enormous cost, and I've heard both sides of the coin say, well, that's the venue's responsibility to make sure the network is running and at the latest and greatest. But when there's built-in obsolescence and when you're trying to do the best you can to keep up the network, there needs to be an area where you have to manage that cost. Because if you don't manage the cost, then you find out that you're putting your money into a research that's outdated. So this is something that I'm seeing that a lot of venues are trying to refresh their inventory, their equipment as fast as possible. But as the technology begins to tends to increase, they're finding themselves running around in circles. So the best thing to do is make your networks flexible. Flexible network with lots of wired connections behind the scenes so you can create a flexible network. And always realize that there is a ratio difference between the number of people and the number of devices. And people will access at least multiple devices at an event. And allocation of bandwidth, I cannot say it enough, is definitely something that has to be for any large event, for exhibition, or for any large conferencing. You need to have dedicated bandwidth. And when you see bandwidth is dwindling in one portion of the event, you can move it. You can move bandwidth around as you need as you need it, and manage it appropriately because you want to mitigate your risk. Because again, in this era of do more with less, it's important for us to be proactive and to understand what the trends are within our market. I'm finished, Paul. I like to thank everyone. I really want to get to your questions.
Well, we got questions for you, Mike. No question at all. My first one though is, can you stop your screen sharing so that we can see you on the big screen? And whilst you're doing that, I just want to pick up on a couple of things where you were talking about density of people at events. I think one of the issues that we have, or big issue, is that if you go to maybe a restaurant or a place where there's a finite number of tables and seats, you know that there's only so many people that are going to come into that area. And to my mind, that makes it easier for you to work out what you need in terms of connectivity, in terms of the bandwidth for that area. And I think that a lot of people believe that experience, if you go into a place that understands that, that's going to be replicated in some of the big events that we go to. But that's not always the case, is it? I mean, I think you need to be really careful, as you were saying, about just how many people you've got coming in, how many devices you have. I mean, I'm standing here holding an iPad. I've also got another mobile phone. People around me, they've got at least, I'm being shown here in the audience, at least 2 or 3 devices. So I think your first point is really important, that it's not the number of people. So it's not, we can get 100 people in theatre style to this event and we need connections for that. You're looking at probably 300 device connectivity as a gauge. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yes, and yes, I would. And just to add as well, all those 300 devices aren't activated at the same time. So as network providers, we understand that. but you need to have the threshold. You need to have the network ability for it to be ready and reserved. And so one way around this, if I can add this part, Paul, I've been to several venues where they will have a reception area set up, and so we're trying to figure out how to build a network, and the planner wasn't sure how much bandwidth, or excuse me, how many devices there would actually be. And so all we did was we looked at the fire number of people legally allowed to be in the room.
Yeah.
Oh, and we said, okay, there's 100 people only allowed, no more than that.
Yeah.
So can I have 2 devices per one? She goes, my budget won't allow it. We'll just tell them 1 device per person.
Yeah.
If someone brings in more, we can't support it.
All right.
So I recommend that look at, see what the fire code is for that particular room or that particular space, and then speak as you're planning the network, figure out if you do 1, 2, or 3 devices per person, depending on the actual event itself, if it's an exhibition or whatever.
Okay, so I mean, some events, and I guess also that some events are going to be more, you're going to have people that are more device friendly than maybe in some older traditional events, dare I say that out loud. But I'm getting some nods here from people thinking, well, hold on, I want to be able to take more than 1 device into an event. So maybe we'll get to a stage where people get their bags checked or something and say, right, okay, you cannot come in with 3 devices or such. But yeah, I don't know how venues keep up with the demand. I don't know how exhibition organizers keep up with demand either, because if everybody wants to be connected and it's getting more and more expensive, then somewhere along the line, something has to change. So really interesting. I remember at Event Camp in 2011, we actually had a little satellite booster outside the venue. You remember that as well because you were there. And we had this satellite there to make sure that the web stream was working, was taking the content outside the room. And it did a very nice job. But we couldn't have anybody else coming in to take away that amount of bandwidth. So it's a really interesting point, and I think it's still one that a lot of event planners can easily miss because, well, it's invisible, isn't it? You can't see this. I mean, GIBTM here have done a fantastic job, Abby, of making sure that this particular space that we're in right now for Event Camp, you can't see it, but it is sectioned off. So I've got access the whole time to the tweets and the social media that's coming through, and that's so important. If we were in amongst the general the Wi-Fi capability of the show, I think it could be different. So this is huge to get those areas, especially if you've got VIPs. There was a press conference in here earlier. So for those kind of people as well, you want to make sure that your device doesn't fall over. So I'm just going to ask the audience, anybody got a last question before we release Mike? And if we haven't, then I've got a question from Megan. What do you like? Okay, so the question is, should you go for a fixed line or a virtual line when you're Wi-Fi, when you're setting up your, what's the difference? In terms of reliability, would you depend on a Wi-Fi, or would you actually say, no, I've got this line and that fixed line is okay?
Yeah, well, I think it depends. And I mean, Megan, there are several. I'm doing an event next week, and I was told to set up an office for the event team when they show up. So obviously, all the lines I'm putting in for that office is all wired because they have their own printers, and they also have some computers that they want to be wired. But some of the event team members are going back and forth, and so we're setting it up where while in their office they can connect in, but when they're moving about, they're wireless. So it would depend on the need. The way technology is now, wireless is just as stable. The only difference is that with wired, you know that you have a dedicated connection. With wireless, if it's not managed properly, anyone can dabble in on your bandwidth. And this is what Paul was just stating about everything's been cordoned off. So it's important to design the wireless network where it's not a free-for-all. And monitoring it properly, it should be just fine, seriously.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Mike. So, in the way that people can connect with you, would you like them at your Twitter handle is
Yes.
Mike L. Clanton. One last question, then we will have to wrap it up, unfortunately. But these questions, you can keep the questions coming in to Mike, because obviously this isn't the end of the. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be around and helping us out. So keep sending your questions down. That'll be fantastic. I'm just having a question here from Ken. Is 4G and citywide free Wi-Fi reducing the need for wireless?
I've heard several years ago, I was told that with 3G, and I was told that, oh, 3G is coming, we won't need Wi-Fi. And again, to mitigate the risk when you're inside of a brick building or iron steel I-beams, do you want to rely your team on 3G or 4G? These are great for backups if you need to do that, but to have a dedicated line where you're trying to mitigate the risk, you're investing hundreds of thousands to bring people together. Do you really want to take the chance of using an outside line to come through a brick and mortar building to send data? And you're trying to give a training.
Right, brilliant. So, Mike, I'm going to thank you for this afternoon joining us live from Strasbourg in France, close to Germany, as we've discovered today. And we knew you were in France because you've got the beautiful Eiffel Tower right next to you, and there's no doubt where you're from. We will keep the conversation going. It's going to carry on long after this event is finished, because, you know, we want to stir up some conversation and help the event industry and help businesses from more successful events. So thank you for this afternoon. I'm going to cut the connection now, or rather Martin Shepherdley is going to do that, so that we can then bring Kirsha in. So I do hope you're going to stay with us and have a look at Kirsha and her ideas on marketing an online and hybrid event. But from all of us here in Abu Dhabi, there's lots of nodding heads, lots of smiles. Thank you so much. I'm sure there are online smiles as well. Really appreciate your being with us today.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Bye.